30 seconds. 20 seconds. 10 seconds.
'Hi,
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Good morning again. This is Jonathan Small, host and producer of All About You. And All About You is one of two different programs that I have the pleasure of hosting and producing every single week live at AccessTV.org studios. All About You is a show that's designed to let you know and learn about the particular guest's life story. And this morning on All About You, we have a very interesting, legendary actor who has a tremendous life story that he is willing to share with the listening audience. The guest this morning on All About You is professional actor, producer, director, no other than John Canada Terrell. Good morning, John. How are you doing?
Well, above ground and grateful.
Okay, it's our pleasure, and that's a good thing. John, could you let people know a little bit, first of all, where you were born and raised at?
I was born in Brooklyn, more or less raised in Queens. So my early history in Brooklyn is a little shady because I was a baby. But we moved out to Queens, South Ozone Park, South Jamaica.
Okay, so what was it like growing up in South Jamaica, Queens?
It was great till puberty. Then it got tricky.
Got tricky. Okay. Well, obviously Queens is known like New York for putting out some legendary basketball players. Did you engage in any particular sports growing up?
I was somewhat of a tennis prodigy because there were prodigies in my family. So I was forced to take tennis. And I was like number one in New York State, ranked nationally, all that kind of stuff. They put me through college.
So who did you kind of look up to growing up in the tennis world?
Arthur. I met him. Met Dr. Warwin Johnson, who they encouraged me to keep accelerating my skill set. And, I went to national tournaments around the country, played the watch circuit, had some ATP points. I just didn't really want the responsibility of being the next Arthur Ashe. I wasn't wired for that.
You don't look back today and have any regrets? I mean, obviously your life and career-wise look like it's turned out very well, but you don't kind of look back sometime and saying you wish you would have took that next level towards being the next Arthur Ashe?
No, simply because I knew myself rather well, and I had such respect and admiration for Arthur that it's very difficult to have filled his shoes in terms of being that articulate, that worldly, that wise, and actually that classy. He had great self-control, and I'm more of a fun person, so diametrically opposed to that.
Do you still like to play tennis today?
I had to stop simply because if you can't play at a certain world-class level, why play around? It's hard for me to play social tennis because I'm very aggressive. I got a big serve. I like to serve and volley. I attack. And that does not fit in social tennis per se. If you're at a certain level, if you play at that level, if they can't meet you at that level, you eat them up.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Well,
so I switched to martial arts.
Martial arts, okay. So what level of martial arts would you classify yourself as? Or you just do it just as a recreational hobby for fun?
That's a good question. I was blessed to have come through. Ron Van Cleef was my original grandmaster. Then I went to Soki Lil John, the Master Moses, that created the Snooker Shrew system. And I've just been in and out of it for 30 years. So under the Islamic Muslim Federation, which is the tri-state area, New Jersey, Philadelphia, New York. I'm a master instructor, okay, which means I'm fourth Dan in Sudokus. I just made first Dan in American Goju, where I teach right now.
Mm-hmm.
And my next film is a martial arts film.
Okay. So now, beyond martial arts, I mean, people recognize you as a professional actor. Did you kind of learn the acting skill growing up in New York or Queens, or when you went to high school? I mean, how did you get the acting bugs?
That's a really astute question. Gordon Parks was kind of like my godfather.
Mm-hmm.
So when he started shooting Shaft and Superfly, I was allowed to come on the set. And since he was my uncle, they really couldn't throw me off, but I'm asking questions. So I met Sheila Frazier, Ron O'Neal. Tony King was a good friend of mine. He kind of mentored me. He's like a big brother. And that was first generation of black filmmaking, black exploitation.
Mm-hmm.
And that had an effect on me. So on that note, after asking for advice, I was encouraged to take it in school, take acting classes, and go full speed in terms of working on my craft. I took it very seriously.
Well, that era that you just mentioned with Shaft and Superfly is kind of a little different era that people recognize you as a professional actor when you would collaborate with Spike Lee. Do you kind of like that beginning era of black exploitation when you mentioned Shaft and Superfly and what those type of films were portraying?
Well, if you look at it from a historical perspective, that's the only black films we had at that time.
Mm-hmm.
That opened the door for us. The ironic thing, I think God has a sense of humor, was that when She's Gotta Have It came out, that was the second phase of black filmmaking. And I was an integral part of it. So I was mentored by that first wave of black filmmakers, and I was an integral part of the second wave. So you can't take that away from me.
And then, John, speaking of the second wave, because you mentioned Gordon Parks as a director.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned the second wave with Spike Lee. And although Spike Lee, let's say Spike Lee styles of movies, I guess you could say was different, but still somewhat similar. Because, you know, with Spike Lee, he always like to sends out a certain message to his movies.
Yeah.
And I think you could almost say the same thing with Shaft and Superfly. So do you kind of like that similarities, or do you like that type of movie aspect where you can send a message to go along with entertaining on people?
Well, absolutely. Media is so powerful, i.e. propaganda of today. The fact that we had a foothold then ushered in me having any success in that second wave. So I'm thankful for that first wave.
Mm.
You know, these were actually models that wanted to break into acting. And with the resources they had at that time, and you got to realize it's a racist industry. So if you were good looking, threatening, and manly, or beautiful and stunning, you were a threat to the commonly accepted matrix of what a movie star or an actress should be.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, John, before we really get into She's Gotta Have It, was this your first feature film, or did you do, or were you involved in any particular feature films before She's Gotta Have It came out?
Really good question. I had a early success playing a young Frederick Douglass because of my look.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of like, okay, this is interesting. Then I did a whole lot of extra work. I did a lot of free films for NYU. That's how I met Spike and Ernest Dickerson. So I was constantly working on my chops. But I took my acting very seriously. I studied the British American Acting Academy, the Roundabout Theater Conservatory. Where else? I belonged to the Afro-American Studio Ensemble, the Billie Holiday Theater Ensemble. So my training was quite good. And I studied at the acting studio.
But would you say She's Gotta Have It and working with Spike Lee, that was like your turning point, moving you in let's say a totally different direction in the film industry?
Good question. I think that I was well prepared for that transition. And since I had been constantly doing short films with NYU graduates, their graduate division, I could make that transition from stage to film, two different genres, but I could make that transition. But I was well prepared.
Mm-hmm.
What I was not prepared for was notoriety and fame. There's no school that can prepare you for that.
Right.
None.
Well, okay. Now, She's Gotta Have It, I believe, was filmed mostly in Fort Greens, Brooklyn, to go along with some other areas. And I believe the filming took place in 1985, although the film was released in 1986.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the people out there, this is the first time that they're kind of getting an introduction to Spike Lee and to somewhat a kind of introduction to somewhat of a different kind of film. I believe this film looked like it was in black and white. It wasn't really like a color picture,
Right.
if I'm not mistaken.
By design. By design.
By design. So what? Right. So what was the whole atmosphere like working on She's Gotta Have It?
Good question. From what I most remember is the pressure of not wasting film. So the onus on the actors would to lock in the scene, play the subtext, and make it real, make it believable,
Mm-hmm.
and not waste film.
Right.
So you take your takes very seriously. At least I did.
I mean, I guess you have to look at this as acting, but was some of this character that you portrayed a little bit like your own personality, or was this just a totally different actor or a totally different person?
Good point. I think the perception of me being in that role was, okay, I'm going to be the next Billy D. Williams.
Mm-hmm.
That was my cachet, I suppose. I'm just, I have far more personality than the average person, and I'm not that narcissistic. I might be a little cocky, but there's a far cry from me and that character being similar in any ways at all.
Right.
Yeah.
John, did you kind of feel, I mean, obviously you mentioned that you were born in Brooklyn and raised in Queens, but obviously you had circulated a lot back and forth, most likely into Brooklyn. Did you kind of like the preference of having this film in New York comparable to, let's say, Los Angeles at that time?
At that time, I think the planets lined up in some kind of perfect way. I don't particularly like LA, to be quite frank.
Mm.
So I'm glad that my initial successes were here in New York, and that kind of prepared me for work in LA.
Mm-hmm.
Put it that way.
What was it like interacting with Spike Lee as the director? And basically, he carried a lot of responsibilities on this film. But what was it like, the atmosphere? Because again, this is actually Spike Lee's one of his first feature films.
Oh, yeah.
So people just don't know Spike Lee at this particular point throughout the country. So what was it like interacting with him at that time?
Well, you got to realize that was my second film with him. I did a film called The Great Duel in 1946. I had to play Horace Silver in the film.
Okay.
And Ernest Dickerson was the director. Spike was the AD or the cameraman.
Mm.
So when they switched it, and that was Spike's turn to direct, Ernest was the AD. Ang Lee did the Spider-Man stuff and all that stuff. He was the sound person. So these were the brightest minds of NYU collaborating to become full-fledged directors, and I just caught them at the right time.
Mm-hmm. Now, again, after this film, you would go on to other films, Boomerang, I believe, with Eddie Murphy. How did that film come about as well?
Good question. The Hudlin brothers were in charge of the Black Filmmakers Foundation here in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And they were both martial artists, so they were part of my martial arts community. And they did a commercial called Selling Oldies But Goodies. And that became a national commercial.
Mm-hmm.
So I already had a relationship with them, and they promoted it. And, it was a small clique of people that were working and doing production here in New York. And thank God I was a part of that. So that national commercial played for over 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, John, this film, Boomerang, some people looked at it for Eddie Murphy as kind of different than his past films. And, obviously you're working with, at this point, a superstar film actor in the motion picture film industry. Was there any, let's say, I don't want to say this on a negative level, but was there any pressure that you felt on yourself being part of this particular film now, working with Eddie Murphy as the lead actor? Because unless I'm not aware, did you know Eddie Murphy, or did you have any interactions with him at that time?
I had seen him in public venues, but I have never had any real interaction. There was a tremendous amount of pressure. One, he was the #1 box office star. It was the biggest budget film I had ever been involved with. So indeed there was pressure. And then two, I had like 9 scenes with Eddie.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a palpable amount of tension between the two of us because he's #1 movie star, but guess what? I get to be Dark Gable.
Yeah.
So that in itself created a level of tension, expectation, whatever the case may be. And his bodyguard was my martial arts instructor. So that put another wrinkle on stuff. Eddie would have my clothes changed because if he didn't like what I had on, okay, well, whatever he did not want to wear, I'd wear. I was the same size. The difference between me and Eddie is that I'm rather muscular. So you put a 40 regular on me, and if it's tailored, I'm going to make it look good. So whatever you don't want to wear, it's going to look great on me.
Exactly.
It was just a little strange to say the least.
Well, let's say this film now is somewhat different than She's Gotta Have It, because it's kind of more directly as a comical film, Boomerang, where She's Gotta Have It, sort of, I don't want to say it's like a documentary. I mean, a love picture is kind of a let's say it's like a different type of film comparable to a comedy film. Did it really make a difference to you now that you're engaging in a comedy film comparable to your previous films?
No, simply because I was a legitimate stage actor here in New York. I'd won some awards, studied with the best, worked with the best. I mean, part of my training was my involvement with the Frank Silvera's Writers Workshop, where all the great actors in New York would come read new scripts, flesh out scripts, work on new scripts. So I'm doing readings with Richard Gere, Samuel Jackson, you name it, they were in there. So I was already working with them on stage to one degree or another. And it prepared me rather well.
Now, The Five Heartbeats is kind of like a musical film with Robert Townsend. How did this production for your role came about with you being part of this particular film?
Really good question, because I really didn't have an audition for that. The casting person, really, I was not on her A-list of actors. So when Robert showed up in town, I knew he was having auditions, but I did not formally have an audition time or interview. So I just popped up, and when the door opened up, I popped my head in the room. I was like, yo, Robert, man, welcome to New York, man. We hanging out tonight. I got you. And Robbie Reed said, John, you don't have an audition. I'm like, good point. I'm not here to audition. Robert said, hold up, John. I want you in my film. I'm like, well, now you got my attention. What you got? John, are you in shape? I'm like, man, I will jump up and kick the light bulb out the ceiling. Come on. Okay, well, John, you're playing Flash. I'm like, well, thank you very much. Robbie Reed has hated me ever since.
Okay.
Ever since.
But I mean, the whole film as a musical film, portraying, I guess, what music groups from the past. I don't know if it was the 50s or the 60s. Did you kind of like this type of style of film now? I mean, you say you are a trained professional actor, so professional actors have to be able to adapt to any particular type of film. But what was your feeling like overall, though, participating in this particular style of film?
Well, knowing the historical context of how it was written and who it was written by, it was more or less written about the Motown stars. Four Tops, The Miracles, Temptations. So aesthetically, why would I not be attracted to that? And then two, in terms of their look at that time, I kind of capsulized that look because of how I look. I'm half Indian, that slick back look, whatever. This ain't no Jerry curl. Right. I fit real good in that genre. So it was good casting, as far as I was concerned. and
Oh.
a great story because it had an historical context. I was proud to be a part of it. But the weird thing about it, New Jack City was being shot in New York at the same time. So I'm staying in touch with people on the East Coast while we were shooting. I'm like, I heard they were throwing down, gangster film. I'm like, okay, did I make the right choice? But then again, I'm having fun. And then Robert's my man. So there was a great ensemble feeling on the set. There were egos, there were pissing contests,
Yeah.
for sure. Like me and Leon are only now getting along. We just did not get along, and it was perfect. The fact that Eddie King Jr. actually was one of my best friends, it was difficult to play, I think, what they expected me to play. They wanted me to play like I was jealous and envious. My take on it was, no, I want to play ambitious. So I played ambition. I want your spot.
Hmm.
And they allowed me to do it.
John, this other film, and I obviously you have to clarify this point with me, but I believe the actor in the other film you had played in was James Bond. I believe the third. What was it, John Bond or James Bond?
James Bond the Third, Death by Temptation.
Death by Temptation. Yes. One thing about him before we get into this particular movie, wasn't he was the same kid that starred in The Fish That Saved Pittsburgh, the
Yep.
basketball film back in
Yep.
1979.
And here's what's wild. Kevin Herod, who's one of the producers on that, is now working with me to get my film distributed. So that's how I got your number, and this is how all this manifested through Kevin Herod, who's one of the producers.
Well, first of all, Kevin Harewood is a major asset to me. He's been very helpful many different times. He played a tremendous role in locking up Sheila Frazier. And I told Stan even earlier, that's what really gave me my confidence level once I was able to book Sheila. But I wouldn't have been able to do it without the help of Kevin Harewood at that time. So I definitely give him honor for obviously helping, arrange this interview here this morning. And but again, this movie would.
Can I share something with you? Sheila Frazier. I worked at she was the a coordinator for talent for Essence TV, and one of my mentors was the producer of the show. So I was offered the announcer job for the TV show. So invariably, when She's Gotta Have It came out, Tony King, Sheila Frazier, all showed up at the premiere to support me because they're the ones that encouraged me to do that.
Right.
So, and that was very special. Very special.
And then again, there's still a New York connection. Sheila Frazier is from New York. She might have lived in Los Angeles, but that's where she's from. Or and that I believe this actor James Bond. He's from Harlem as well. James Bond the third.
That I'm not sure.
Okay. But Death by Temptation. Now, how was this film? I mean, how did you feel about participating in this particular film as well?
Well, the curiosity of doing another genre, horror, was very appealing. And I naively signed on board. And I knew what kind of character I was going to play. I'm like, okay, I got to play suave and being a bastard, being rude, being oversexed, being a dog, whatever. I can do that. The strange thing about doing a horror film is that I think there are certain entities that pop up on the set when you start dealing with dark matter, and it was very strange on that set. Very strange.
To do that, yeah. But again, I mean, out of the four films that we just mentioned, I mean, do you look at them in a rating category? I mean, which one would you say stands out as the most, for you personally, as the one that you, let's say, look at as the best one that you participated in between the four films that we talked about?
Well, that's a good question, but there's some other work that I did that I feel aesthetically more proud of.
Mm-hmm.
I did a film called Nursing Tuskegee. And it's about the Tuskegee syphilis experiment.
Mm-hmm.
And they had the HBO version, the mainstream version with Larry Fishburne and Alfre Woodard. Well, I did the independent version playing that doctor, and it was a Junie Smith film. So I'm rather proud about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, nothing wrong with that, obviously, and I mean your acting skills. But I also mentioned in the introduction that you are a professional producer or professional producer and director as well. So, what are some of the projects towards producing that you have worked with or worked on?
I collaborated with my business partner to do a one-man show and take it to HBCU colleges years ago. It was called Meditations of a Dangerous Fool. Very political, very edgy, and it gave me a certain theatrical license to walk around with a microphone and talk to the next generation of educated Black people about what's happening in this society, my own bend on things, and I kind of challenged the faculties while I was in the midst of my show, and it got very tense sometimes. Because my perception was that of a Black nationalist. That was my niche in terms of what my subtext was with what I was sharing with the audience and with the student.
Right.
So very edgy.
Yes.
I might revisit that.
Okay. All right. John, let me ask you.
Canceled, but I might do it.
John, let me ask you a question. I mean, give me your
Sure.
honest answer. I don't know, as great as Spike Lee has become as a film director, producer, actor, I mean, basically the whole 9 yards, I don't know if he really gets the credit and respect that I think he deserves. I'm not saying he is not getting credit or respect, but I don't know if he's really looked at truly as one of the icons and the directing world and some of the films that he has done and just the impact of what he had to go through to get to where he is. Or do you think he does get the kind of respect and credit in Hollywood towards what he has accomplished?
I think that he means well. He's very bright. He's politically savvy. This is not a safe Negro. And I think that in itself was very threatening to Hollywood. Okay. Okay, I was dipped in and dipped out. Am I in?
We can hear you. I mean, we need to see you.
Okay.
He's there. Okay.
Okay.
You're back.
I think he set a certain precedent in terms of having a point of view that was not mainstream, and I applaud him. No, I don't think he's appreciated as much as he should be, but then at the same time, it opened the door for so many other Black directors and producers to get their feet wet in the industry. So I applaud him. I have my own personal feelings about loyalty that are mine alone. Because if I came out the gate with you and we all blew up, well, how come I'm not doing other films? And then how come I got a small role in Mo Better Blues? I had some problems with that.
You know what? I was actually going to ask you. Do you regret or what was the circumstances? I don't know if you had any roles in Do the Right Thing and Malcolm X, but I just kind of want to get your opinion. I mean, what was the whole take now? Because those were two critical films that Spike Lee had, filmed, and it looked like to me that you could have been a good fit for one of those two films. So what was?
I concur.
Okay.
And that was a very question I asked myself at that time, because I knew everybody in the film. Everybody. I either worked with them, knew them, or we had done readings together. So I think it was like a loyalty thing. It's sad, but don't talk all that Black Ungawa stuff, all right, and not be loyal to another Black man that was there in the beginning. Because he didn't have no money. Luckily, I got points on the gross, and I finally got compensated after the film had success. But I took a risk.
Well, one thing I heard, I don't know if this is a rumor or not, but, we all know Spike Lee had a collaboration with Denzel Washington. I mean, Denzel obviously was going to be Spike Lee's man. But I thought I heard one time that there was some consideration for Lawrence Fishburne starring in the film Malcolm X. but I believe it was going to be Denzel Washington's film or Nobody. Um, you can't take anything away from Denzel
No.
Washington, and you can't take away some of the chemistry and the collaborations that they had together. Um, but do you still think that maybe other actors could have kind of filled in, like a Lawrence Fishburne and some of the other films that Spike Lee put together?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, and I can only answer that as an actor.
Mm-hmm.
Harry Lennox, who was in The Heartbeats, he played Dresser. He got into the Five Heartbeats by doing The Meeting. Malcolm X meets with Martin Luther King, and it was a brilliant show. I believe that Harry Lennox would have tore the Malcolm X role up. He would have taken it to another level. Not only did he look like him, but he had that persona, the same as Denzel could bring to the table. But I just thought even more so. I think Harry Lennox is brilliant, and I was fortunate enough to have co-starred with him.
Yeah. Well, sometimes, friendship is something that you really can't overlook. And if you are friends with someone, no matter how good the other person may be, that person usually is going to go with their friend. And I don't, like I say, I don't know the whole stories behind the collaborations with Spike Lee and Denzel Washington, but I would assume they had that type of bond that was just going to be hard to really penetrate unless they had some type of falling out, which I don't think occurred. But currently, are you in New England, I believe, working on the Springfield Film Festival or something on this level? Could you kind of give a little update on what you're currently doing, if that's the case?
Oh, well, that indeed. Okay. I was in and out. I think I'm back. Hold up. Or not.
You're back.
I'm in. All right. Am I in?
Yes, you are.
Okay. That's a really good question. Spike made a wise decision. I mean, Denzel was really top of the food chain in terms of black actors here in America. He was the benchmark. So that being the case, it was a wise decision. But then again, I know a lot of great actors. I saw Harry Lennox play Adam Clayton Powell Jr. to the T. So, there's some actors with some tremendous range that are just now really getting a shot.
Well, sometimes it's not about how great you are, just giving the opportunity. I mean, you can be great and you just don't get the break, or you don't get the right connection. I mean, this is Hollywood. This is obviously, I mean, I know you have to audition in most cases, but obviously if you're a standout actor, you really don't have to go through the auditions. I don't know for sure, but I don't think Denzel had the audition for the film. And sometimes when you build yourself up as an A-list actor, you can obviously get that type of opportunities that other actors, upcoming actors, or actors that's just not that well known will not be able to get. And you just kind of have to live with this to some degree. But I believe I was asking you about what you're currently involved with, and through Kevin Harewood and other people up in Springfield, are you kind of on some type of panel with this upcoming film festival that they're having taking place now?
I'm just finding that out this week because I got to go there. I got to be there, I think, Thursday. But in adjunct to what you were saying, Denzel actually was the main character to play Eddie King Jr., the Five Heartbeats.
Oh.
When Michael Wright showed up or had conversations with Robert, he found that Mike Wright was the more perfect character to play that particular role. And Denzel was hanging out with us when we were shooting. So that in itself was something. But him and Mike Wright are very tight. And sometimes the right actor gets the right role.
The right role, right.
Yeah.
Well, now, what other things, I mean, whether it's related to the entertainment industry or just in general, that you're currently involved with or working towards in the very near future?
Well, one, I'm supposed to do this martial arts film. The tricky thing about that I did 3 or 4 of them. But martial arts is my secret. I bear no arms. I don't really want people to know that I'm a martial artist. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
It has saved my life on several occasions. It's kind of weird. This industry, black actors have to be twice as good. Don't look better than the white guy. I was told I didn't look black enough, but then at the same time, being educated, 90% of the men in the world look like me. So I would bump heads with casting people, and I'm brutally honest, and I'm kind of fearless in terms of what comes out my mouth if I'm saying the truth. That did not bode well for my career. Then two, as they promote this LGBT thing, this new agenda, I have some problems with that, some moral problems with that. Therefore, there's a lot of roles I turn down.
Okay.
Good luck for the person that can do that. Good luck, Will Smith. Good, that ain't me.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to use my imagery to foster something that I find morally repugnant. But that's me.
Right.
That's me.
Well, I think I heard one time, and it might have even been Spike Lee, but someone mentioned like in Hollywood, particularly for the black market of television and particularly film, it's 3 levels of type of films that you are looking to portray as the majority films. It got to be either some thuggish, hoodlum type of gangster style movie, some silly, no consciousness love scene, love movie, or just some other type of it could be a comical type of film with no substance, just the norm. It's just that standout type of styles of films that black people are looked at or should be looked at is just kind of rare on a positive level. You have to fall, from what I heard, into one of those other 3 categories, unless you are really well established and you can kind of demand a certain type of film that you almost own and control everything. Is that still the case, or is there anything changing that you see now in Hollywood or just the film industry in general that black actors and film producers and directors could kind of do exactly the type of film that they would be looking for, not just even on a positive level, but just the type of film that stands out with some real substance matter, more than falling into those other 3 somewhat negative categories?
You brought up a really good point, and I battled and wrestled with that over the last 35 years, to be quite frank. Me being the next Billy D. Williams, I found boring. Boring. Because it's my job to essay human behavior, where there's so many different levels, so many different nuances to human behavior, that I need to be challenged. I just did a film called Kingdom Reign, playing a major, not so much a gangster, just a crime boss leader, but it had to do with the Iran-Contra involvement of the CIA. So I was a conduit for all the drugs coming to the East Coast and distributing it for the government, and I had to turn over my kingdom to my son. And I just wrapped that. It just premiered. I think I did a pretty good job. But I like to shine a light on something that needs to be explored or revealed to the masses. I like that. I like edgy stuff.
Right.
The film that I produced that now is coming out, at that particular time, it was an opportunity to do something comedic and kind of silly. There's a silly side to me that I just got to let out every once in a while. And I had fun producing and being in that particular film.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, you're still labeled as a professional actor. You still engage in the acting film world, and this type of era that we're in today, because you mentioned I guess earlier during the show, that the 2 levels of the black film industry, how it kind of was, let's say, established from the beginning stage with the black exploitation. Although that wasn't really, you could say that was the starting point. You can make some cases back in the Amos and Andy days, but
Yeah.
that was kind of more like TV show. That really wasn't a real feature film.
Right.
So you're correct. This kind of what the Gordon Parks era with Shaft and Superfly
Hmm.
was kind of like the beginning stages of the Black exploitation film industry. And then when Spike Lee came along in the mid to the late '80s, that was like another different level. The level where we're at today, do you kind of? I mean, I guess you have to fit in to the era that you're in, but do you
Hmm.
look at this era kind of on a likable level comparable to the previous two eras that you were involved with? Well, particularly the last era, because I don't know if you were involved with the black exploitation era.
That's a really astute question. I think because of the proliferation of new black directors and more opportunities for black product to be put out, I think it got abused and maligned because a lot of new directors and writers get stuck in that
Okay.
gangster rap milieu that I find is boring and has been exploited and abused. And the market is being flooded by BC films that don't push our people forward or have any reasonable message because we've beaten that horse to death.
Hmm.
That's my thing. So I kind of avoid those films unless I have a really good role that there is either some nobility or something endemic in that person that needs to be essayed. It's the role and then the story and
Hmm.
then who am I working with. I mean, my next film I just got offered, it's called True to the Head. They're trying to bring in Terrence Howard. Now, if he comes out of retirement to do it, it'd be great to work with him. I know him. Uh, Whether or not his martial arts skills are up to par, don't know. Um, Mine are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I like working with really good actors, and I like a really good story, and I just want to flesh the story out and tell the truth. That's all I really care about.
Well, John, due to the fact that we're pretty much out of time, and I always try to like to end the program somewhat on a positive upbeat, and those were a real good, honest assessment on how you view today's industry in the television and film level, and to go along with what you're currently participating in. But as I also always like to ask the guests towards the end of the show, if
Mhm.
there's any last things that you would like for the audience to know about yourself or just how you feel or what you're currently looking to do, feel free to do so.
Um, there have been two or three projects that were my dream projects that before I leave this planet, I hope I'm involved with either as an actor or director or producer. One of which is the John Horse story. I'm half Indian on both sides, Seminole and Blackfoot. Well, the Seminoles never gave up. I would love to tell that story.
Mm-hmm.
I optioned a script called Gunrunner, written by Gerard Brown, that wrote Juice. And I went broke trying to produce it simply because, one, I was trying to produce it in the state of Pennsylvania. And so I'm dealing with millionaires trying to raise money, but I had serious attachments. I had Selma Hayek, I had Robert Duvall, I had Bing Rames, um, I had some A-list actors. So the conundrum I ran into with dealing with millionaires trying to get it funded was, how did you hook up with these people? I'm like, excuse me, you have your film expert in here. I Googled him. He's done no films. He might have a law degree, but he knows nothing about the industry. And I'm only contacting people that are my peers or I'm a peer of. And graciously, they allowed themselves to be attached to the film. So why are you attacking my credibility where the question of who's in it, I got the who covered.
Right.
Now give me $15 million. Don't punk me and give me five because they tried to punk us on the money.
Right.
And $15 to $20 is a low budget film according to Western European standards. So we get the punk money to do our film. We get less to do more.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate that. I don't like it. But that is the industry that we're in. I'm just hoping more visionary filmmakers arise and take this very seriously. because media propaganda is a very powerful thing. We're talking about some brave new world stuff. So if we don't tell stories that resonate and talk to humanity and talk to the human being in us as people, we're doomed.
Well, John, those are going to have to be your last words. I mean, it was definitely a learning experience having you as a special guest this morning. Again, special thanks to Kevin Harewood and yourself as well. It was a great presentation, and possibly I look forward to meeting you one day. I mean, obviously you're right up the road from where I live at, so I got to work on that. But again, definitely you had brought a lot to the conversation this morning, and I appreciate you being available for this particular show.
I thank you for indulging me. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
All right, good buddy.
Good day.
God bless.
God bless you too. Okay, this is Jonathan Small. I just enjoyed hosting this edition of All About You with the special guests, professional actor, director, producer, John Canada Terrell. And I thought it was a real interesting learning interview and segment, and I definitely wished him the very best of luck in the very near future. I do have a guest already lined up for next week, a British entertainer. Not quite sure if I'm going to do it All About You or face-to-face, so I have to work on making a decision for that. But again, until you see me again, for people out there, have a blessed day and keep the faith. Thank you.